Hello and welcome everyone. This is Type V3 with a figure review of what is arguably the most iconic rendition of the famous Dark Knight. This is the DC Collectibles animated Batman from the late 90s cartoon series The New Batman Adventures. Seeing as how this figure kicks off a new toy line, let's start with the packaging. It's black and blue with a minimalist aesthetic and bold text which greatly appeal to my own personal taste. The figure inside serves as the main focal point, and I especially love how there's no cheesy product shots or silly gimmick advertisements around back. Also, giving credit to the toy sculptor is a nice touch. The only drawback that I can see is the blister card packaging. Once opened, well, there's no going back. Onto the figure itself, and I don't think you need me to tell you this, but Batman looks just about perfect. If there was ever a character that looked like it jumped straight out of the screen and onto your desk, this toy would be it. It's incredible to see how closely the sculpt follows the original lines drawn by Bruce Timm, and even more impressive is that the aesthetic is correctly captured from every angle. Paint apps are pretty decent, things are evenly distributed, and the edge work is mostly crisp. My Batman has some black overspray on the face, though I've seen far worse examples. If possible, I recommend sifting through a couple Batmen in person before purchasing. Now there's one major area that really annoys me with regards to presentation, and it's basically everything to do with the crotch area. Firstly, those exposed front pinned hips are awful, and I don't understand why they weren't covered up. Then there's the multiple joint cuts in the hips which look odd. Also, the utility belt is far too streamlined and could have used some extra dimension. To be fair, none of these issues are deal breakers, still they do put a damper on the excitement. Overall, the presentation on this 6-inch Batman action figure is fantastic. There's definitely one or two problems here that keep it from being absolutely perfect. However, in terms of replicating its animated source material in a three-dimensional form, this figure is aces. For articulation, Batman's head is on a ball joint, goes left and right, slight up, slight down, a slight tilting, and you'll notice here that it's really flush right up against the cape and that looks really nice. But what you can do is you can pull it out, and there's a second locking point right there, and it exposes a little bit of a gap, which kind of sucks, but you do get a lot more range of motion now, which is great. As for the torso, all you really have here is a waist swivel, and that's it. Now, I'll go around back. This is the cape, and the cape is this nice, soft, pliable plastic. It feels like rubber, but the great thing about it is it doesn't look like a cheap rubbery material. And I just really like how you can move it around, and yet it has this really solid shape. Now, of course, that does mean it blocks off the arms, but there is a trick. You can actually just take off the head, pull off the cape, and there is a second cape included, and this one allows for movement with the arms. With the arm unimpeded, you can get the shoulder to come out about that far. There is a ball hinge at the elbow, which can only really get you about just less than 90 degrees, which, not the best, but at least it's something. The wrist can swivel, and there's also a hinge there, and if you're wondering, these are actually just straight pegs in the wrist. That's all they really are. For the legs, you're going to get the hips come out this far forwards. They can go backwards pretty far. Outwards is excellent. I mean, you can get it go out all the way, although that does look weird. I mean, there's no denying that. The knee joint is a single joint, and it really only goes about that far out. Kind of disappointing. You'll notice there is no thigh swivel, but there is a swivel right at the top of the boot. The ankle can pivot upwards and downwards, and of course there is an ankle tilt here too. I think it's pretty obvious that this toy sacrifices all posability in favor of its aesthetically pleasing sculpt. Sure, there may be 26 points of articulation, yet with their poor range of movement, they don't really amount to anything substantial. The extra cape is nice, though. On to the accessories, and this is where things get interesting. Included are 4.5 pairs of hands, a single batarang, a grapnel gun, and a display stand. Elaborating on the hands, fists and open palms will serve as your basic display options. Then there's 2 different pairs of gripping hands, one meant for the batarang and the other meant for, well, I don't know. It isn't used for anything in this toy, but I'm sure generic items will suit them fine. The last hand is a single right side option only, with the grapnel gun sculpted in. It does its job fine, and yes, this effectively renders the solo grapnel gun accessory useless. One thing I'd also like to point out with my copy is that the wrist hinges on both pairs of the gripping hands were permanently paint stuck. Furthermore, I've seen multiple reports of the wrist hinges breaking because of this. In truth, I didn't mind the problem, though it is an alarming situation. Finally is the included display stand. The base has some simple artwork and the arm is nothing more than a straight rod with a Tamashii stage inspired claw. To my surprise, it can actually support the weight of the figure, though between Batman's mediocre articulation and the stand's static position, there's not much variety you'll be able to get out of it. From the minute it was revealed right up to the moment it was released, there's been huge hype surrounding the DC Collectibles animated Batman, and to a larger extent, the toy line as a whole. In fact, this is the toy line I was personally most excited for all year. So where does it stack up? Well, for starters, the toy looks gorgeous. It just embodies the iconic cartoon Batman. Of course, this was a well-known fact since the initial product shots. So then, what about the general playability? Well, articulation is decent, and there's definitely some sturdy build quality too. There's also a hefty amount of accessories which validate the $25 price point. It all seems good, yet I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I'm slightly disappointed. Yes, animated Batman looks great. However, as a toy, as something that I want to pick up and play with and just have fun with, it isn't very satisfying. Ultimately, the nostalgia factor is what's attracting me to it most. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad toy. It's actually quite good for what it is. Here's the thing. Before, I thought I'd be a completionist with this new toy line. Though after experiencing the DC Collectibles animated Batman, now I know I'm only in it for a few select favorites. But that's all for me. Thanks for watching, and I hope that DC Collectibles further expands this toy line beyond the Batman license. I know I can't be the only one hoping for some Teen Titans figures done up in this style.